we are live. Gosh, huge amount of people coming. Hello, everybody. Hello, Aileen. How are you? Hello, Nima. Hello, Michael. Hello, Nadine. Hello, EuRA. How are you? Jennifer, how are you? I was talking about, I need to talk to you, Jennifer. Got a project. Joe, how are you? So thank you very much, everybody, for joining us today for this briefing on EuRA's GDPR certification process. The session is, for those of you who come into these briefings frequently, you'll hear me repeat myself as I always do. The session is being recorded. So if you do have to drop off the call or you need to take a call, then don't worry, it will be on YouTube. I will get this edited and sent out to everybody who has signed up tomorrow. And it will be live on, on demand on YouTube in a couple of weeks' time. We have 129 people signed up for the call today, which is terrific. So it's obviously a topic that is, let's say, important, or at least dear to people's hearts, or at least it's so frightening that we have to have, a clear consensus of how this is. I do remember, Gordon, you and I being in a board meeting prior to the Dubrovnik conference, because I know that we were in Dubrovnik, and you outlined what GDPR was going to mean. And I think 3 or 4 people on the board at the time, including Susanna, who's on the call, said, well, that's it, we haven't got a business anymore. That was the level of fear that GDPR, when it came in, really inspired in people. I'm just going to make sure as well that I put the chat window up. So, hi, Marion. If you've got a question anytime, please put a note in the chat window. You will see the chat symbol at the bottom of your screen in the middle. Just hit that. And just a little quirk of Zoom, that will automatically default to hosts and panelists. So if you would like to talk to everybody, just flick down on the hosts and panelists and go switch it to everyone. And that will also then record your question in the document that goes alongside this, which if there are some very good questions to answer, but I'll try and vocalize all of the questions so that you can hear any queries that people have got. So we'll leave it a couple more minutes. We've got 42 people currently in. There's obviously quite a few more people to call, but obviously we understand with these calls that a lot of people will watch it on demand. So yeah, Gordon, we were just talking about how this came about. And I think about a year ago, you suggested having something, because I think you've been doing some work with other EuRA members.
That's right. I had 1 or 2 requests to carry out some form of assessment or informal audit of GDPR compliance. It was 6 years on from when GDPR came in. And of course, when it came in 2018, well, 2 things really happened in practice for EuRA members. Firstly, suddenly all these IT consultants popped up and said, for £20,000 or euros, we can just sort out GDPR for you. So there was that kind of side of, we got to be wary of this. And then there was the practical side of companies doing their own thing, which was great. It was largely very effective. We ran a lot of training programs at the time around GDPR to help firms. But also, I think in the early days, there could be a tendency to over-design. So firms ended up with loads of spreadsheets and loads of columns, and we're trying to capture all kinds of information, which, as it turned out, was unnecessarily admin heavy. So yeah, more recently, firms reviewing it and saying, can we cut back on this? Do we have to do this? Our business has changed a little bit. What do we need to do for our foreign transfers, etc.? So based on that experience of working with a few firms, that was the thought of coming to EuRA and saying, I think there may be demand for some kind of cost-effective assessment that allows firms to say, yeah, we are GDPR compliant, to make clients aware of that, and just be comfortable that they were on the right side of the rules. So yeah, I'm glad we've now launched.
We got there. Well, thanks to you. And 2 things I was going to mention. First of all, you said cost effective. I remember Tad and I were invited to go and talk to the Relocation Directors Council in the US before a WRC conference, I think in 2018. I had a long conversation with you about, what do we say? And, so we went and gave our little spiel, specifically about, we've been asked to talk about GDPR and its implementation. And one of the members of the RDC came up after our presentation and said, I wish I'd heard you say that 6 months ago, because I've spent the best part of $200,000 becoming client on this. And that was the fear. And, you know, that we were all going to get caught out. And I know you've said over and over again, the GDPR rules are much more aimed at huge corporations. I mean, the fines, I think, have always been the British Airways is a notable one, I know, and you've always noted other ones. But we are going to talk today about a certification and compliance process. And just for everybody on the call, if you are not aware, Gordon updates annually our GDPR guide, which is available for free for all members on the website. Just go to the publications tab and make sure you're logged in, and you can go to that page and download it on an annual basis. It's a go-to guide, and it will really, really help with this certification program. Gordon, I'm going to start the presentation. Again, just for everybody listening and watching, I don't know if it does it to everybody, but it always does it to me whenever I open a presentation in Zoom. It takes up my entire screen. Just press escape and it will bring it back down to the window that you're currently looking at, because it is very annoying. Right, so Gordon, you let me know when you want me to forward on, oh, hang on, didn't get that right. When you want me to forward on the slide, and I will go ahead and do it. For the time being, I will just share my screen with your presentation. So like I say, just press escape, and at any time you've got a question, pop it in the chat box and I'll interrupt Gordon when I've got a moment, and we'll go from there. Right, Gordon, you should be able to see that.
Thanks, Tom. So I wanted to start with just a quick overview of the 4 steps in the process of obtaining a GDPR certification. Firstly, we would issue you with a questionnaire, which basically is trying to capture the data flows within your organization. How does personal data come in? How does it go out? What do you do with it, etc.? And I'll come down, drill down to these questions in a moment. And secondly, we would be asking you for your GDPR documents. What documents do you hold? For example, your privacy notice, which would typically be on your website, and then probably would be a separate one for your own employees. There'll be a GDPR policy, etc. And again, I'll talk a bit more about these documents and processes that we would look at. And then we're really taking how you handle data and the documents and processes you use and comparing that with the 6 GDPR principles. And again, I'll remind everybody of what these principles are. And based on that overall assessment in steps 1, 2, and 3, we will then issue a report. Hopefully that report would say we're really happy, this firm is completely GDPR compliant, and EuRA will issue a certificate. But if we discover any gaps, then we discuss them with you and work out how to fill these gaps and then issue a certificate. So it's a very positive process. We're helping you get through it. It's not one where it's a pass or fail. Yeah. Okay, if we just drill down to the next one.
Will do. I'm sorry, 2 things I just want to say. First of all, thank you. That's exactly what we'll do. And just to remind you, it's a bit like going through the seal. You know, we're not trying to, it's not designed to make you fail. It's designed to make you able to show what it is that you can do. And secondly, Andrew, I did not introduce you. And I'm so sorry, that was incredibly rude. It's great to have you with us. Thank you so much, Andrew.
Thank you so much for the invitation. Really appreciate it. Great to be here. Thank you, Don.
Andrew is was very kind in becoming our very first certified EuRA member, and so has test driven the program. So thank you very much, and we'll come on to that a bit after the presentation. Gordon, I'm sorry, I will put that back. And Andrew, my apologies.
None needed, Don.
Okay, so firstly, we're looking at the data that a firm holds, and just a series of questions which are summarized here, making sure that you have an understanding of whose data do you process. Is it, just employees of organizations? There will be your own employees, of course, but having a clear understanding of that. And what types of data do you hold on these individuals? It may be as simple as contact information, or it may be copies of passports. There's a whole wide range, depending on the precise services that you deliver. And of course, we're looking particularly, is there any sensitive data that you hold on racial issues, religious, etc. And then understanding where data comes from and how it's collected. And we're really talking there as simply as, does your data come in by email? Is it on telephone calls? Is it through your website, through a case management system? And perhaps the simplest question of all, why are you collecting this data? So it's really important to be aware that GDPR is saying you can only collect data for specific purposes. In the case of most relocation businesses, it will be as simple as we collect the minimum data required in order to deliver the service. And this is why we have the following categories of data. How do you store data? Is it cloud-based? Is it a server in the office? Do you still use filing cabinets? That would be part of GDPR. And how long do you store the data for? Do you have cutoff points? And by law, under the GDPR, you must have deletion dates for data. Is everything up to date? So when you're advised by a customer of a change of address, change of phone number, do you have a system in place for making sure that that is updated? And then the last point there, and it is the one that probably catches firms out in a practical sense, and that is, who do you share data with? And that's a combination of your own suppliers. You may have a supply chain. You need to have contracts in place with each of these suppliers that covers GDPR requirements. And if any of that data is shared with partners or suppliers outside the EU, UK, then there are specific obligations on protecting that data, and we have to be very careful that we're complying with these. And I actually just was reading this morning the TikTok case where TikTok was moving personal data and storing it in China without sufficient notification to subscribers, and the fine was huge. You know, I mean, 300, 400 million from the Irish authorized data protection board. Okay, if we go back to the next point, step two. Sorry, Dom. When I say go back, of course, I mean go forward.
Sorry, got it. Yeah.
So step two. And this is where we're asking to see your actual documents, and typically these would be privacy notices, some form of data protection policy, and an overview of your data security measures. So if we go on to the next slide, just to drill down a little bit on what these things typically look like. And again, this will depend on, you may have a very simple requirement for data protection compliance. You know, all you're doing is operating in one country and all you're doing is collecting contact information on your customers, nothing sensitive, in which case you will have a very simple data protection policy. Though bear in mind, it also will have to cover employee protection, data protection of your own employee data. There'll be things like data retention guidelines, how long you are keeping data for. And the other points I've mentioned, what policy have you in place for data transfers that take place going outside Europe, and your supplier contracts, the clauses that are required in there. And typically, and this is something I would encourage, large companies need to have a register of processing, and that's really capturing all these data flows, which you will have anyway, but also a register of any complaints you receive, any access requests from customers, and evidence that you've deleted data, whether that's once a year or however it works in your your organization. So you've got this overview, meaning that if you ever were audited by a data protection authority, it's here it is. You're not having to scramble around digging out information from various sources. And one thing, although it's not mentioned in the GDPR, it always is sensible to have a disaster recovery plan. What happens if your systems go down, whether accidentally or whether under attack from cyber criminals? What happens? How do you keep the business going and having, backup systems in place? So if we go back again to the 4-step process, oh no, I'm going to, yeah, that's fine, Dom. I'm going to mention security measures just before we go back to the process. The way we're looking at this is what measures do you have in place? And we're talking real practical terms here. How do you use passwords? Do you use encryption? If you use filing cabinets, do you have policies on locked cabinets, clear desks, etc.? And staff training should be in there as well as a key part of security measures. And again, the reason for that is that so many ransomware attacks take place because of an initial phishing attack. An employee doesn't pick up that there's something odd about this, and a password is disclosed to a criminal, and just the release of that password allows the criminal gang to get into the system, and suddenly you're subject to a ransomware attack. So staff training is something I would really emphasize. And then also thinking about protecting data when it's outside the office. What rules do you have around portable devices, etc.? And lastly, looking at the threat of cyber attacks, and of course we've had that in the relocation industry itself, causing enormous challenges, enormous costs if you're subject to a ransomware attack, and actually understanding exactly what your cyber insurance is protecting you against and what it's not protecting you against, having real clarity around that. So that would just be summing up the typical security measures. So if we go on to the next one, we're then saying we've reached stage 3. We've got the details in of the data flows. We've got the documents and processes that you use. We would now be measuring your compliance against the 6 GDPR principles. And just to remind you what these are, if we move to the next slide, Dom, the 6 principles are, firstly, are you processing data lawfully? Well, typically in the relocation industry, we rely on consent, employees' consent. But it also has to be fair and transparent, so you can't be hiding anything in small print. And in fact, that was one of the reasons TikTok were fined so heavily, is that they may have disclosed somewhere in their documentation that data may be held in China, but it wasn't clear at all if you were a typical TikTok user. Purpose limitation, are you quite clear that you never use the data for any other purposes? In other words, if you're using it for relocation services, you don't then go on to use it for marketing purposes without getting additional consent from the individual. Data minimization, you only collect data that is required in order to deliver the service. The accuracy principle, so you update and keep data accurate. The limitation on storage, in other words, you have deletion dates for each category of data. And finally, what the GDPR calls integrity and confidentiality, really just meaning data security, which I've already touched on. So we'd just be going through each of these 6 principles and ensuring that the combination of the data you process and the documents and processes you have in place match the 6 principles. And I would add there the requirement for accountability under the GDPR. It's not enough to be doing all these things. You have to document it as well and be able to show that you are actually compliant. And then if we move to the next one, we're then at the final step. A report is issued to your firm if there are any compliance gaps, explaining what these are and discussing how to remedy these. And subject to any remedial actions, Dom will then issue a very spectacular looking compliance certificate. Oh, you happen to have one.
Here's one I prepared earlier.
Prepared earlier, yeah.
Andrews, yeah, absolutely. I'll show you properly in a minute when we take down the thing. Yeah, absolutely. Gordon, that's terrific. Thank you. I'll just do a stop share. It's really interesting. I mean, we've been terribly lucky as an organization because Gordon has guided us through this process over years and years and years. So, you know, but it was interesting. I mean, when you very first started looking at what we do, we were like, we don't hold any sensitive data. And I remember you saying, well, you ask about people's dietary requirements. And so actually that is quite sensitive data because it could be down to something very personal such as religion. And so therefore, you know, where we share our stuff. And I remember again having a conversation because we're a Dropbox based organization. At that time, Dropbox was hosted in the US. So we had a bit of an issue with that too. And it wasn't, you know, something we would have thought of without Gordon's help. So I do really firmly believe in professional help on this, I've got to say.
So, Dom, if you could move on to the next slide, and you know, unless there's anything else you wanted to add there.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you very much.
And with huge thanks to Andrew, we thought we'd talk through just how this all works in practice. And Andrew, if you're happy to, perhaps those who don't know CAP worldwide, perhaps we can talk about the services you deliver and a little bit about the business.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Gordon. And so I am I have the title of COO and in fact CTO of CAP Worldwide. So for me, data privacy, data security is an absolutely key part of my role within the business. CAP, Corporate Apartment Programs is what CAP stands for. We are a global service department booking agency. We work with direct corporate clients as well as with relocation management companies and travel management companies. And we provide temporary accommodation solutions globally. And we work through tri-regional offices in EMEA, APAC, and the Americas. And essentially, we've got a team of about 50 today globally, working with us to support our clients. Given the type of clients we're working with, data privacy, data security are still a very, very, very key agenda item. When you look at the news almost every week, you'll see a company that suffered a hacking attack or a ransomware attack. I think those people who've been traveling by air this week or last week, there's been, I think, a further issue at Heathrow with, I think, Collins Aerospace, who handle sort of check-in procedures, have had a ransomware attack. This is very high profile, and it's very often it is a person in a bedroom who's able to get into a large corporate system. And I think it's, from my perspective, making sure that we have a high alert around anything data privacy, data security is my enduring focus, really.
And so looking at your business specifically then, Andrew, what types of data do you need in order to deliver your services? What are you collecting and sharing?
Well, I mean, we work with, as I mentioned, direct corporate clients as well as with relocation management partners. So we're working with business travelers, we're working with assignees, we're working with project groups, and we're also working with CEO level assignees down to graduate analysts and everything in between, really. So they've all got an expectation that their data privacy is secure. We request really the minimum amount of data that we need to search for accommodation and to secure a booking. We may also request data for a client's traveller tracking program and perhaps for their management reporting. But ultimately, we are looking at the really minimizing data down to name, the new to work location, their phone number, their email address, perhaps an employee ID if that's required from a corporate perspective. But we don't collect or we don't hold any sensitive data or financial information. So we don't, for instance, hold credit card information.
Yeah. And I think that's really important. And that's why I make it the starting point for the assessment, that it all builds up from the kind of data an organization collects. So the fact that you don't, for example, hold credit card information takes it down a level in terms of, the sensitivity. And I don't think you would hold passport information, copies of passports either.
That's a great point. Sort of going back a step, we launched in 2019, and when we launched the business, we built our own system from scratch. So we use cloud-based software. We also had the opportunity to look at what does best practice look like? What data do we actually need to collect? Because generally people were collecting a lot of other information they didn't actually need. Most corporates are very happy for you to take the information that you absolutely need to perform a service. More than that is unnecessary risk from their perspective. So we try and ensure it's minimal. There are various products you can use, various merchant systems, which mean that you don't have to hold financial data. And again, that makes the whole process much, much easier.
Yeah, yeah. So in terms, I think you mentioned there that the company was formed in 2019. So presumably that was a huge advantage that GDPR was already in place. You weren't
It
having to
was.
redesign your processes or introduce new documents. Everything was new and GDPR compliant then.
I think it was understood that I think the requirements were understood. So that meant for us to create a system from scratch at that point. The software that we chose had a certain amount of sort of data flows already built in.
Yeah.
The data collection was very clear. The explicit consents you can build in very easily. So that I think really helped us. And I think as well, it helped with the security as well because you sort of talked about servers and everything else and networks. We don't have any servers or networks. Everything is cloud based, and I think that sort of design from scratch definitely was a help in having sort of a high level of compliance out of the box effectively.
Yeah. So that was obviously a good start from your point of view. Looking at it more recently, what were the areas where you felt there may be challenges for your GDPR compliance?
I think probably it was around our growth. So we are still a relatively new company. Yeah, from launching with a team of 5, we're now a team of 50. Just reviewing really where we are today. We go through various external audits, assessments around everything from penetration tests, vulnerability assessments on behalf of our clients. One area where we wanted an external expert opinion was around GDPR, because obviously we updated all of our information post Brexit and the withdrawal agreement, but it's an area which still remains key and is an area that you really want an external expert to come in and give you, give you a view of where you are and what improvements you can add. I think you have to see this as being a little bit of a continually evolving process.
Yeah. And presumably, by the nature of your business, you're having to share data, this personal data you're collecting, albeit it's mainly around contact information, but that would be having to be shared with suppliers in other countries and not necessarily within the EU. Would that be right?
Yes, absolutely. And in the same way as if you're booking a hotel stay, the hotel needs to understand your contact information, have a way of contacting you pre-arrival. To your point about data, we don't request passport copies either, and we don't request credit cards. On arrival, a property may well request that they hold a copy of the passport and they hold a copy of a credit card for incidentals. That's fairly standard practice,
Yeah.
as it is with hotels. But from our perspective, when confirming a booking, we're literally just providing the name of the lead traveller, and we're providing a form of contact, which is usually a phone number, in case of any issues, or just so they can ensure they know who's arriving. Because not all service departments have a front desk. There are those which are still meet and greet, or they require a connection with a host on arrival.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, final question. How was it for you, Andrew?
It was fabulous. From our perspective, I think again it comes down to that reassurance of having an external expert come and take a look over where you are. And I think as a process, it was smooth, it was consultative. I think we were happy with where we are, but we still learnt a lot. And I think again, it's that sense of a reassurance of an external professional coming in and saying, "Hey, this is really good, but have you thought about this?" I think that was really valuable for us.
Great, great. Okay, Tom, I think we're back and looking at pricing next.
Are indeed. And there's some very interesting comments and questions that have come through, most of which I know the answer to, some of which I don't. So first of all, Natalie, yes, you will get this certificate once you have undergone the process, and you'll have this logo that you can use on your website to say that you're a GDPR certified member of EuRA. And you can also use that on your email signatures. Very good question from Priya. Would the GDPR audit take place at the same time as the quality seal and on an annual basis? At this stage, no. Gordon, do you want to talk through that?
That's correct. No, this would not be an annual audit. There would be two things that would trigger you to perhaps want to renew the certificate. One would be if your business had changed significantly, if you'd moved into another country, or the kind of growth that Andrew has just described. So you had 5 employees at one point, and you now have 50 employees. Clearly, the way that data moves around your organization has probably changed. So that would be one trigger. And the other one would be if the law itself changed. So we're talking about the GDPR 2018. I don't think there are going to be any fundamental changes to that in the near future. But let's say in 5 years' time, it would a new GDPR comes in, which raises standards in some areas. Then, of course, an old assessment certificate would not be as valuable in that context. But no, the short answer is no. This would not require to be renewed annually.
And 2 other very good points that have come through. So thank you very much for that. Will the GDPR audit become mandatory for premium members? That is those who hold the EuRA Global Quality Seal. Again, we've talked about this. At this stage, we're going to trial this for the next year. Martina and Gordon and I, Martina Sharvai, who's the project director for the EuRA Global Quality Seal, have talked about it and whether or not it would be advantageous. But for the moment, no, this stands alone. But Gordon, we will discuss with the board whether or not this should sit within the seal. We're trying not to make things too onerous at the moment. But very good question from Dawn. Is this certification recognized or endorsed by any global organizations? Dawn, you have hit upon my life's work. And unfortunately, no. We have worked with so many different organizations over the years. We're still working now on having our academy training externally validated by a university. These kind of things are just incredibly complicated to do in terms of the fact that, again, Dawn, great point. We looked at whether or not the EGQS, the EuRA Global Quality Seal, could be given an ISO number. And it's unbelievably expensive. And I think the last time Martina looked into it, it would take a minimum of 7 years to start that process going. And with the numbers of people that are involved in a certification like this GDPR or like the EuRA Global Quality Seal, the audit companies are not interested in volumes that small. And this is a challenge that we face. But certainly, Damien, thank you. Sorry, you're asking about would other certifications impact the process? Gordon, would ISO 27001 does not include GDPR, does it? Apart from the way that the seal does in terms of it is important you are compliant.
Yes, that is a good question. We don't want to reinvent anything, and it will be where, for example, there may be some national certification that a company already has covering GDPR. We would certainly look at that. We're not trying to create extra work here. I think what we can do, though, is say everything we're going to do is in the context of the relocation industry. So that's what I think makes this certification more valuable in a way because it does look at the realities of how you do things in the context of the relocation world, such as, you know, deletion times for documents and keeping data. We're able to look at that as what's typical in the relocation sector, what's the best practice. So, but yeah, we would happily look at any other certification that impacted on this and took away the necessity for one step.
No, exactly. And I think, again, you know, Pedro, you're asking, do you consider industry-wide a DPO is mandatory? Well, compliance is mandatory. Let's put it that way. Non-compliance with GDPR can, you know, hopefully in the context of the EuRA membership, isn't, you know, going to be of a breach that would be fined the hundreds of millions of dollars that Gordon was talking about with TikTok. But certainly, I mean, just from our point of view as an organization, Andrew, you said exactly the same thing, knowing that we're doing things correctly and not likely to be tripped up on something which we didn't even realize. For example, where is our data going? When we produce
Yes.
for the conference, that data is going globally. So the app designers need to be GDPR compliant. We need to be GDPR compliant with the data that's going into that. So even though I look, I I think it's a really good idea to do something like this because I am massively risk averse. So that would be my take on it. Gordon, do you want to talk about the costings that we're looking at in terms
Yes,
of
actually, just before we move to that slide, Dom, the question from Pedro about the DPO specifically. So, do you need a data protection officer? No, I would say that in our industry, it's not mandatory. And I can talk about the technical reasons for that. What you do need is a data protection manager, and if you just you know, somebody who's responsible for data protection in your organization, in other words. But if you decide to call them a data protection officer, then you can find that that person's obligations under the GDPR click in. And so for that reason, it's more, or a lot of organizations will decide not to use the term DPO unless they're actually doing all the things that the GDPR requires of a DPO. So there's a technical element in that question as well.
surely. Interesting. Very interesting questions. Thank you, everybody. And again, if you've got any other points to make or questions to ask, please pop them in the chat box. In the meantime, Gordon, I'll send you back to the presentation.
Could I pick up the ISO 27001 question as
Yeah.
well very quickly? I mean, from my perspective, that is a globally recognized certification. In the relocation sector, we have companies of all sizes. And I think a smaller company would find that ISO 27001 is all consuming. I would say the compliance certificate is a really great benchmark. I think it helps you to answer some of the key questions. Where's my data stored? How my data flows? And I think it's a really, I recommend it highly. We have a variety of different certifications and processes we follow, but I think at a high level from a GDPR perspective, this is a fabulous product.
Excellent. Thank you, Andrew. Gordon, on to pricing. I can't make that move forward. There we go.
Yes, so how much does it cost? We have introduced a fixed fee of €2,000 or £1,750. If gaps were identified, then of course a firm would be entitled to use either their internal resources or any consultant to assist them in fixing these gaps. But if they asked to be done as part of the EuRA assessment, that would add another €1,200. And just to be clear, you know, what is excluded from the GDPR assessment, we're not coming in on a technical basis to carry out penetration testing. We're basing the security assessment on the documentation you have, the password controls, use of encryption, your description, of each of these checks. Maybe there's a training manual or your description of the training that's carried out. But we've tried to keep this as simple as possible. But the costs really reflect, for it to be worthwhile, we need to collect the information from you. We need to review the documentation. We need to review the processes in order to then have a certificate that is worthwhile, where we can actually put the EuRA name against it and say, yes, we are satisfied that your firm is GDPR compliant. And that's the kind of compromise we've come up with, something that we hope will be affordable, but really worthwhile as well.
I mean, just comparing it, I mean, when you showed me sort of market comparisons, one of the things I think every single conference that I go to in our industry, especially right now when, you know, times are tougher than they have been, these extra layers of consulting that are coming in that are costing huge sums of money. I was talking to somebody at one of the FIDE conferences who was saying, you know, especially with something like sustainability, proving an EcoVadis certificate or something similar, it can be another layer of consulting. And this is why with this project and with our sustainability guidelines, we're trying to give you that amount of information without having to go down the route of very expensive consulting. But as the point that, you know, back to Dawn's point, could our EcoVadis certification be considered as proof of our GDPR compliance, allowing us the EuRA certification? At this stage, no. And there's a very straightforward reason for that. EcoVadis do recognize the EuRA Global Quality Seal, but they haven't in certain cases. So it's not a defined process with EcoVadis. We would love them to recognize this. We would love them to recognize the seal. They've said in writing that they would recognize the seal, and yet people who've gone through the audits have not had the seal recognized in their EcoVadis certification. So at the moment, this is one of these things that, again, there's a lot of extra things going on out there that people are paying a lot of money for. We were trying to, basically with this project, Gordon wanted to come up with something that was Loctite, straightforward, and cost effective. So that's where we are at the moment. EuRA, yes, this can be done at any moment. You can do it whenever you like. And I will run through very briefly how to get started. So you can send a message to me, and I'm just putting my email address in the chat, or to my colleague Marie, who actually will be dealing with this process. So she's probably the best person to start off with first. And she will send you all of the information about this. Once you've decided you want to go forward, she'll put you in touch with Gordon, put you on copy, and you can then directly communicate about how and when you'd like to do this. Then the system will take place. Basically, anybody who inquires to us, there'll be a page on the website live tomorrow. I'm hesitant to set it live at the moment because there are so many bookings going through for the Malta conference. I don't want to upset the web system at the moment, but it should be live tomorrow, and you'll be able to go on there and then just basically see everything in terms of, you know, how this process works, and then be able to go forward. Gordon, have I missed anything with that?
No, that's, I mean, we really are trying to keep it as simple as possible. And I think, yeah, inquiry into Dom or Marie, and we'll take it from there.
We'll send you all the details that you need. And then, like I say, the process will be Gordon going through the actual audit with you, and then your certificate at the end. This is on the 100 today. So yeah, I mean, it's the thank you tab. I thought EcoVadis had recognised the seal, but then they rejected it in the case of one member. And again, back to Dawn's point, you know, one of the things that would be so great for our industry is if everything could be recognised. You know, these are you know, well-developed systems. The seal's been going since 2008. You know, it's been tested and tested and tested. It's updated every year. This will be a similar process. And we're trying to cut these expensive layers of consulting, you know, for EuRA members as much as we can. And yes, John, the audits will all be virtual. Yeah, there'll be no need for face-to-face. Good question. Thank you for that. Thank you, Damien. Great project initiative. Thanks for putting this together. We'll be in touch from backside. We look forward to it. If there's anything we can do, obviously let us know. Does anybody have any comments or questions? Gordon, Andrew, anything you'd like to add?
Nothing from me, no.
Good. I mean, like I say, from point, go on, Andrew. Yeah, please.
I was just going to say, this doesn't need to be scary. I think it's a really, the way it's explained is very, very straightforward, easy to access, easy to understand. And I think probably it will give everyone a bit of a sense of assurance that they're doing the right thing. I just think this is not an area which is going to go away anytime soon. And yeah, do you know what? It's something which keeps me not awake at night, because then we've had our audit from Gordon, so we're far happier that we're doing the right thing. But I think it's an area of continual focus. So I think, this is fabulous. Team training, etc. I think is so important just to keep ahead of some of the threats that we face today.
100% agree. Jesse, very good question. How long do you anticipate the process to take? That is going to depend on how advanced your compliance currently is, right, Gordon? So if you're already halfway there, it'll be quick.
Yeah, I mean, for a company that is fully compliant, then we have the data flows, we have the document checks. I would, for a compliant company, it could be as little as 2 weeks. But where we find gaps, then clearly there will be a longer process. But no, it can be done very quickly for a company that's pretty comfortable with what they have in place. This is not months; it's weeks. Yeah.
And John, good point. Scarier to be uninformed than informed. Totally agree. And just coming back to what Gordon was saying about things like penetration tests and security, really hammer down your suppliers on that kind of thing as well. I mean, we're very lucky. We work with an awesome supplier for our CRM system, our web system. Nothing is impenetrable. I mean, nothing. And that is the thing that keeps us all up at night, I think. But they are doing their very best to make sure that we are compliant with what they say is best practice, as our IT providers are, who, to TAD, they insisted we move to much more expensive hardware, because the hardware we were using up until 2022, 23 wasn't capable of really of running the level of antivirus and anti-penetration software that they want us to have, without it impacting our systems being slower. And we were finding that just opening an email was incredibly frustrating. So yeah, it costs money. That was something that they advised us to do, and we took it to heart. And so this is a problem, Gordon, that we're trying to solve with this certification program, is trying not to cost more money than it needs to. So anybody have any further comments or questions? We'll get around to those. Otherwise, thank you very much, everybody, for taking part. This will go live tomorrow, and I will have that webpage up hopefully tomorrow, but give me till after the weekend. It looks as if we will be closing Malta to bookings tomorrow. We can't quite believe how fast that conference has sold out. But that hopefully the advantage of that means I can get this webpage worked out over the weekend. Gordon, thank you so much for all your expertise on this. It's been a pleasure working on this, and it's opened my eyes. And Andrew, thank you so much as well for being, our first certified EuRA member. Very good, well done.
Thank you so much for the invitation today. Really appreciate it.
Glad you were able to join the call. Thank you very much. And as I say, anybody on the listening today, if you do have any, we're looking forward to the Malta Sunshine, definitely for you. Anybody who's got any questions, please don't hesitate to let me know. If I can't answer it, I'll pass it straight on to Gordon. And if you do have an inquiry, as I say, Marie, M-A-R-E-E at EuRA-relocation.com, or me, Dominic, at EuRA-relocation.com. And we'll do our very best to help you through the system. Thank you, Helen. That's very kind of you to say. So we say goodbye. Thank you very much indeed, Andrew and Gordon, and we will catch up very soon, and hopefully start this process going for members. So thank you very much indeed for everybody for attending, and we will catch up again soon. Thanks, Gordon.
Thanks so much.
Take care.
Bye-bye for now.